This story is not for people who want to stay comfortable. This story is for people who want to know exactly what a husband is capable of once he learns the truth about a wife who betrayed him and how far that kind of destruction can actually go. I'm going to tell you everything from the very beginning. And by the time I'm done, you're going to understand why I did what I did. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago, a nurse handed me a folded piece of paper that told me my entire marriage had been built on a lie. I live in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, and until that paper landed in my hands, I believed I had the perfect little family. A wife who loved me. A 3-year-old daughter who called me Dada the second I walked through the door. A life I built brick by brick, working double shifts just so my family would never want for anything. Emily and I met in college, at a small school outside Dayton. She had this warmth about her that pulled people in without even trying. I was 22, broke, and completely convinced I had found the one. 4 years of dating turned into a small backyard wedding. A week before it, Emily's roommate pulled me aside and said something strange. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I laughed it off back then. I wish I had asked her what she meant. Married life started off steady. Then one evening, Emily came home holding a small paper bag, and inside was a positive pregnancy test. I drove straight to a toy store and bought a ridiculous stuffed elephant, because I had all this happiness inside me and nowhere to put it. But even then, some evenings she'd go quiet out of nowhere, phone glowing in her hands a little too long, blaming it on pregnancy exhaustion. I had no reason not to believe her. Twice a week, she started attending a prenatal class alone, always insisting she needed to clear her head. One day I offered to drop her off, and suddenly the class had been canceled that week. I shrugged it off. When you trust someone completely, you don't go looking for cracks in the floor. Sophie arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, and the second the nurse placed her in my arms, something in me shifted forever. I whispered a promise to her right there, that no matter what happened, I would protect her. I had no idea how badly that promise would be tested, or that the danger to my daughter's peace wouldn't come from some stranger, but from somewhere far closer. The first year of Sophie's life turned me into the kind of father who takes 300 pictures of a kid just eating cereal. Emily played her part too. Attentive most days, though quiet, distant moods never fully disappeared, and she'd get defensive fast whenever I pushed to understand them. I told myself every couple struggles after a baby. I repeated that to myself for almost 2 more years, until one offhand comment at a family barbecue cracked my world open in under a minute. Sophie was 2.5, chasing bubbles across the yard, when my brother's father-in-law, a retired doctor, knelt down to play with her. He mentioned, almost as a joke, that Sophie had a very particular earlobe shape, the kind that's strongly hereditary, and that neither Emily nor I seemed to have it. He meant nothing by it. But that one sentence buried itself deep in my chest, and I could not shake it loose. For the next few weeks, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Earlobes don't prove anything, I kept thinking. Some old guy at a barbecue doesn't know my family better than I do. But once a thought like that gets planted, it doesn't just disappear, it grows roots. And every small thing I had brushed aside over the past 3 years suddenly started crawling back into my memory, one after another, like they had all been waiting patiently for their turn. I started noticing things I had trained myself not to notice. Emily's phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter without a second thought, now stayed face down, always within her reach, never more than a few inches from her hand, even while she cooked dinner or gave Sophie a bath. If it buzzed while we were sitting together on the couch, she'd glance at it fast, then set it somewhere I couldn't see the screen. I asked her about it once, kept my voice light, tried to make it sound like a joke. She laughed too, but it was a stiff kind of laugh, the kind people use when they're buying themselves a second to think. She said work group chats were driving her crazy, that her coworkers wouldn't stop texting about scheduling. I let it go. Again. Then, there was the gym membership. Emily had never been much of a gym person before Sophie was born, but about a year after our daughter arrived, she suddenly signed up for a place 20 minutes away, when there were 2 gyms practically walking distance from our house. She said the classes were better there, the instructors more experienced, and I nodded along because why would I question something so small? She started going 3, sometimes 4 evenings a week, always after Sophie was asleep, always coming home with wet hair and her gym bag zipped tight. I never once thought to ask why a woman who barely broke a sweat before marriage was suddenly this dedicated to fitness. Looking back, I think some part of me didn't want to ask, because some part of me was already afraid of what the answer might be. The barbecue comment kept eating at me though, more than I wanted to admit. One night, After Emily had fallen asleep, I sat in the dark kitchen, scrolling through old photos on my phone, comparing Sophie's face to mine, then to Emily's, then back to mine again, feeling like a paranoid lunatic and unable to stop myself anyway. Sophie had these deep brown eyes, almost black in certain light. My eyes are hazel, Emily's are blue. I told myself, plenty of kids don't look exactly like either parent, that genetics skip generations all the time, that I was spiraling over nothing. But that night, for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I couldn't fully push away. What if the old man at the barbecue had noticed something real? 2 weeks after that barbecue, I finally worked up the nerve to bring it up with Emily directly, though I framed it carefully, almost like a joke, the way you test the temperature of water before stepping in. We were doing dishes, and I said something like, "Hey, random thought, but do you think Sophie looks more like your side or mine?" I watched her face closely when I said it. For just a second, barely half a second, something flickered behind her eyes, something sharp and startled, before she recovered and laughed it off, saying Sophie was a perfect mix of both of us. Lucky girl. But that half second stayed with me. I've replayed it in my head more times than I can count. It wasn't the answer that bothered me. It was the flinch before it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Emily, listening to her breathe, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in my own bed for the first time in 3 years of marriage. I kept thinking about the gym bag, the phone that never left her hand, the canceled prenatal class, the flinch over the dishes. None of it proved anything on its own. But stacked together, piece by piece, it started forming a shape I didn't want to look directly at. The same way you don't want to look directly at the sun even when you know it's there, burning quietly above you the whole time. By the end of that month, I had made a decision I never thought I would make about my own wife, about the mother of my child. I decided I needed to know the truth, no matter what it cost me. I just didn't know yet how to get it without blowing up everything around us if I turned out to be wrong. I spent almost 2 weeks researching before I did anything at all. I read forum posts written by other men in situations that sounded eerily close to mine. Men describing the exact same spiral of small clues piling up into something they couldn't ignore anymore. Most of them said the same thing, that a home DNA test was the fastest, quietest way to get an answer, without confronting anyone, or making accusations I might not be able to take back. I ordered one online, paid extra for expedited shipping, and had it sent to my coworker Marcus's address instead of my own house, because I couldn't risk Emily seeing the package first. Marcus was the only person I told during those weeks. We'd worked together for almost 5 years, and he was the kind of friend who wouldn't ask 100 questions or judge me for what I was about to do. When I explained what was going on, laying out every small detail, the phone habits, the gym visits, the flinch over the dishes, he went quiet for a long moment before saying something I'll never forget. He said, "Man, I hope you're wrong, but your gut is usually right about this kind of thing." I didn't want to hear that. Some part of me had been hoping he'd tell me I was being paranoid, that I should relax, that marriages just go through phases. Instead, he confirmed the fear I'd been carrying around like a stone in my chest for weeks. The test kit arrived on a Thursday. Getting Sophie's sample wasn't hard, since the kit only needed a cheek swab, and I did it one evening while pretending it was a game, telling her we were checking to see if her tongue could taste secret flavors. She laughed the entire time, completely unaware that her father's hands were shaking as he sealed the swab into its little plastic tube. Getting my own sample was easy too. The hardest part was standing in our bathroom afterward, staring at both sealed tubes sitting on the counter, feeling like I was holding a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. I mailed the samples the next morning before work, dropping them into a mailbox 2 towns over instead of the one near our house, paranoid that Emily might somehow see me and ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. The website said results would take anywhere from 5 to 8 business days. Those 8 days turned into the longest stretch of my entire life. I went through the motions at work, at home, at Sophie's bedtime stories, all while carrying this secret that felt heavier every single day, like a slow leak filling a room with water while everyone around me kept breathing normally. Unaware they were slowly drowning too. Emily noticed I was acting differently, though she didn't know why. She asked twice if something was bothering me at work, if my boss was giving me a hard time again. I lied both times, said I was just tired, just stressed about a project deadline. Lying to her felt strange in a way I hadn't expected, considering what I suspected she might be hiding from me. Some nights I'd catch myself staring at her across the dinner table, trying to read her face for guilt, for fear, for anything that might give away what she'd done, if she'd done anything at all. She just looked tired, ordinary, like any other exhausted mother of a toddler. Either she was a better liar than I ever imagined, or I was about to destroy my entire family chasing a ghost that didn't exist. On the sixth day, I got an email notification that made my stomach drop before I even opened it. The subject line read, "Your DNA test results are ready." I sat in my car, in the work parking lot, for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself click on it. My thumb hovering over the screen, like it belonged to someone else. I opened the email right there in my car, and the first thing I saw was a single line near the top of the page, written in plain black text like it was announcing something as ordinary as a weather report. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read those 4 words maybe 15 times before they actually landed, before my brain stopped trying to rearrange them into something less devastating. Sophie was not my biological daughter. The little girl who called me Dada every single day, who fell asleep on my chest more nights than I could count, who I had promised in a hospital room 3 years ago that I would protect no matter what, shared none of my blood. I don't remember driving home that day. I remember sitting in the driveway afterward, engine off, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at our house like it belonged to strangers. Everything about it looked the same. The porch light Emily always forgot to turn off, Sophie's little bike tipped over in the yard, and yet nothing about it felt real anymore. I sat there so long that Emily eventually opened the front door and called out, asking if I was okay. I told her I'd be in soon. I needed a few more minutes to figure out how to walk into my own home and look at her face. That night, after Sophie was asleep, I sat Emily down at the kitchen table and placed the folded results in front of her without saying a word. I watched her pick it up, watched her eyes scan the page, watched every drop of color drain out of her face in real time. For a long moment, she just sat there frozen, and then she started crying. Not the kind of crying people do when they're caught, but the kind that comes from years of carrying something too heavy to put down. She told me everything, in pieces, through broken sentences and long pauses where she couldn't look at me at all. She told me about a man named Chris, someone she'd known casually from her old job before we got married, someone she reconnected with online during a rough patch in our first year together, back when I was working nonstop, and she said she felt invisible in our own house. She said it started as talking, just talking, and turned into something else during a work trip he took to Columbus, right around the time we were trying to get pregnant. She said she found out she was pregnant 3 weeks later and convinced herself, desperately, that the baby was mine, because that was the version of the story she could actually live with. I asked her the question that had been burning through my chest since I read that email. I asked if she ever really believed Sophie was mine, or if some part of her always knew. She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, she said there was always a small doubt in the back of her mind, one she buried under work, under motherhood, under the daily noise of a life that looked normal from the outside. The prenatal classes she went to alone, I learned that night, weren't prenatal classes at all. The gym visits weren't gym visits either. Chris had moved to a town 20 minutes from us, about a year after Sophie was born, and Emily had been seeing him on and off ever since, right under my roof, while I was working double shifts to give our family a better life. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there in silence for what felt like an hour, staring at a woman I no longer recognized, in a kitchen that no longer felt like mine. Somewhere down the hallway, Sophie was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that the ground beneath her entire world had just shifted forever, and that the man who loved her most in this house had just found out he had no legal or biological claim to protect her at all. I didn't sleep that night, and I didn't confront Emily again either. I just lay awake next to a woman who suddenly felt like a stranger, running through every possible version of what came next, and by morning, I already knew what I had to do, even if it broke me to do it. The first call I made wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Marcus, because I needed someone to talk me through the next 48 hours without falling apart completely. He listened. He didn't judge, and he said the only thing that actually made sense to me at that point. He told me the truth doesn't stop being the truth just because it's inconvenient, and that Sophie deserved a father who stayed honest, whatever that honesty ended up costing everyone involved. I met with a family lawyer 3 days later. I learned things I never wanted to learn, about paternity law, about custody, about how much protection a man actually has over a child he raised but didn't biologically father. In our state, because I had been listed on the birth certificate and had raised Sophie as my own for 3 years, I still had a legal path to fight for custody, or visitation if I chose to. That single fact changed everything about how I approached the weeks that followed. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about a 3-year-old girl who had no idea her entire world was about to be rearranged by decisions made by adults she trusted completely. I moved out 2 weeks later, into a small apartment 15 minutes away, close enough that Sophie's routine wouldn't be destroyed. I told Emily I wasn't disappearing from Sophie's life. no matter what a piece of paper said about our blood. I made that decision clearly and calmly, and it was the only part of this entire nightmare that felt like something I actually controlled. Emily cried, begged me to reconsider staying together, said Chris meant nothing to her, that it was Sophie's father, meaning me, that truly mattered. I told her the time to say that was 3 years ago, not now, sitting across from divorce papers. Word got out to our families faster than I expected, the way it always does. Emily's parents were devastated, though her mother, in a strange moment of honesty, admitted she'd always had a bad feeling about Chris reappearing in Emily's life. My own parents were furious on my behalf, and my brother, the one whose father-in-law had unknowingly cracked this entire thing open with one comment about earlobes at a barbecue, felt guilty for months afterward, even though none of this was ever his fault. The custody agreement we eventually reached wasn't perfect, but it protected the one thing I actually cared about protecting. I see Sophie every week, sometimes more, and she still runs to the door calling me Dada the second she hears my key in the lock, completely unaware of everything that happened behind the scenes, to make sure that word still meant something. Chris, as far as I know, has taken almost no interest in being part of her life, choosing instead to disappear the moment things got complicated, which honestly told me everything I needed to know about the man Emily chose to betray me with. People online love to argue about situations like mine. Some say I should have walked away completely, cut all ties, refused to raise a child that wasn't biologically mine after everything that happened. Others say I did the right thing, that love and responsibility matter more than DNA, that Sophie never asked to be born into this mess, and shouldn't lose the only father she's ever known because of choices her mother made. I still don't know, honestly, which side is right. All I know is that every night Sophie falls asleep in my arms during our weekends together, some part of me feels certain I made the only choice I could live with, and another part of me wonders if I'm just a fool who forgave the unforgivable for the sake of a little girl who isn't even mine.